What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Layback Podcast. Joining us today is Ian Seymour. Ian Seymour finished this past year in Triple A in the Tampa Bay Rays organization, which means he finished up as a Durham Bull. He did also spend a good chunk of the year down with the Montgomery Biscuits, which I'm sure we'll spend some time on the transition between Double A and Triple A. But Ian's had an awesome career thus far, put up some really good numbers, and especially this past year, his first full year back, recorded some record highs in innings pitched, games, starts, all the above. So it was really cool to see him get back on the horse after dealing with none other than a UCL injury, which is ultimately how we got connected. Ian was doing some work with Mike McFerrin, and Mike and Ian talked a little bit about what we were doing, and Ian hit us up, found out what we were doing, and wanted to get on board, which I thought was awesome. So major shout out to Ian. It's been awesome to get to know him over the past, I guess, 6, 7 months, a little bit before the season started, maybe last December, I think is when we got connected. But yeah, with that, Ian, I'm going to pass it over to you. Pick up the pieces. Whatever I missed in the intro, I forgot to mention you're Virginia Tech Hokie. Forgot to mention you're from Massachusetts. So hopefully that's enough for you to pick up the pieces. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be here. I guess you pretty much covered it. I grew up in Massachusetts, got recruited, went and played baseball at Virginia Tech, and then I got drafted during the COVID year. So a little bit of a strange time to enter professional baseball. So really, I guess my first year was shortened because of COVID. It was a month short. And then my second year, I ended up pitching like 10 or 12 innings, getting Tommy John surgery. And then that took me until middle of 2023, where I only threw a couple starts coming back from rehab. So this past year was my first full professional season, and it also coincided with when I started working with you and Flex Pro Grip last December. So there was definitely a lot of factors that went into staying healthy, but I would 100% give Flex Pro Grip credit for a career high in innings and all sorts of things like that. So I'm just a part of my routine now, and I'm excited to sort of share my process of, I guess, rehab, of training, of injury prevention, and all sorts of things like that.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate it. And we are not naive. We know Flex Pro Grip is only a small piece of what you do. You have an awesome team behind you, whether it's your training. I know you just had a little bit of a checkup, just body checkup. You do a couple times a week, making sure everything's functioning properly. So maybe that's a good jumping off point. If you're cool to dive into what you do to prepare your body, we'll get into the timeline later. But I think it'd
Mm-hmm.
be awesome to just look into what an off season looks like for you.
Yeah. Well, so currently, I guess my last start was last week of September. So I haven't started throwing yet. I'll probably start playing catch on Monday. I've been playing catch with the football and just like light, moving my arm around and stuff. But my official throwing program and number of throws and stuff like that, I think starts Monday of next week. So that's when the off season really begins for me. But currently it's a little bit boring. I have my lower body days on Mondays and Thursdays of lifting, and then I have my upper body days Tuesday, Friday. And then Wednesday and Saturday are more conditioning based. And really I just continue that schedule through until probably I head down to spring training. That's my off season. So it's a good group of guys that I work out with, and it makes it enjoyable, honestly, to get everything done. But yeah, it's the off season's a different time because it's very free as opposed to the structure of the regular season. So I enjoy that aspect of it. It gives you a little bit more free time to just hang out with friends and family and stuff like that. But the work is a priority, and getting your body ready. That first month block, I would say, is like just getting it back in shape to build. I guess how I would describe it is like you build up a mountain, and then you sort of slowly deplete that as the year goes on. And like I came back at the end of the year down at the bottom, so I'm building up my work capacity again.
Yeah, that's a interesting way to look at it for sure. I know everybody has their different strategies. Some people, for whatever reason, they must be superhuman. They can continue to push themselves like crazy during season. I feel like that's might be a little bit easier when you're at the big league level. I don't know. Granted, they play 162 games, but
Yeah.
they also have the best everything at their disposal. I
For
know
sure.
for you, you're hopping level to level, city to city all the time. I
Yeah.
guess thankfully you now know that you're in the same place for 6 straight days pretty much before
Yeah.
you have to travel again. I'm sure that made minor league life just a little bit easier. But
Definitely. The
yeah,
routine of it is much easier with the, well, I wasn't, my only experience in professional baseball is the 6 day schedule. So I don't
true.
know anything other than that. But yeah, the routine and also just being a starter, like it gives you a little bit more freedom to lift a little heavier and push yourself, especially in the earlier months. So you can maintain things a little bit longer into the year. But I would say just, I mean, I hadn't pitched a full season until this year. So just from that aspect of things, learning, oh, I can make it through a full season. And I felt better, honestly, in September than I did in April. So just knowing, like, repeating what I did then is really just my only focus. Like, oh, I mean, that works clearly. So just sort of riding that momentum.
It's nice to know that you have it figured out a bit. Of course, nothing is ever going to be perfect. We can always chase perfection. But as you said, you felt great at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard so many pro guys say it. They're just chasing every single day to get back into the green. It seems like every day they're in the red, or every time they pick up a ball, how do they figure out a way to recover? How do they get back to neutral? Because they pretty much know they're not going to feel great again. At least that's what I hear from a lot of people. They're not going to feel great again until the season's over. So just
Yeah.
whatever they can do to feel good enough each time they have to pick up a ball. And the fact that you were able to extend that all the way through and really get through a full season feeling good is a testament to the plan that you've built and I guess all the people in your corner.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I think like that was, I guess, the biggest knock on me was that I have never been able to put together a season from start to finish. So to finally like have that is just a very good feeling. And like to know that like, oh, I can do it. Like I'm capable of that. And it just like it gives further motivation to continue doing the things that I do on a daily basis and prepare your body to pitch every 5 or 6 days, whatever it is.
No doubt, but you say you hadn't gotten to complete a full season. I know some of that is not entirely on you because of COVID. You didn't get to play unless were you an alt site guy your first year, or did you just get drafted
No,
and they
I
say
got drafted and I just like was home. It was
like,
great. Yeah. There was an instructs that fall, so I went for instructs. But before that, I was just doing nothing.
yeah.
No, like it was definitely a strange time to enter professional baseball.
Was your gym at least open that first summer, or were you truly just drafted and then on your own?
Well, it was in March when everything ended, so I was at Virginia Tech still.
Yeah,
And
true.
I stayed there until June, and then gyms started opening up in
Okay.
Massachusetts and around June. So I was able to work out pretty much just uninhibited through that whole time. But it was kind of directionless. Like you didn't know exactly what was going on.
Right.
Um,
So, like at any given point, you could get called. I'm sure at least that's what you were thinking. Like, oh, 2 weeks from now, I got to be ready to step on a mound and get dudes out. Or 2 weeks from now, I could be in Port Charlotte having to throw to whatever. I'm sure you were just waking up every day. Like, is today the day we get that call, get that email?
yeah, I guess no, I wasn't really informed of that. The Rays didn't bring anyone from the draft class down to the alt side. So it was
Oh,
pretty much
okay.
yeah. I got they were just like hang around. We're hoping for something this fall for you guys. I'm like, oh, all right, well, I'll hang around then.
Yeah. So I guess that was probably the most relaxed summer that you had since
That it
shoot,
was
I don't
weird.
know.
I've never yeah, I haven't been in Massachusetts in a summer since I can't remember when since I played at the Cape really.
Yeah,
Um,
in what year were you in the Cape while you were at Tech?
that was 2019. So 2019 I was at the Cape, and then 2020 was my junior year, and I got drafted after those. I think I made like 4 starts, and then that was that.
Okay, and you got drafted, you said your junior year.
Mm-hmm.
Have you gone back and finished the degree yet?
I did well. So COVID actually helped out with that. So that they made everything online, so I didn't have to go back to school. I could just finish all my classes online because
Oh,
of
that's awesome.
COVID. Yeah, so I ended up graduating everything without having to go back to school.
So you
like
were
physically. So I was in school, but
100% officially a Virginia Tech Hokie alum.
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, not just someone who put on the baseball jersey for a few years. You
Yeah.
you have
I
the
got
diploma
my
and everything.
degree. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That was a good feeling too, because that was not an easy thing to manage, to like all those classes online and stuff, like figuring it all out.
What's
But
your
yeah, once
degree in? I know
biology,
it's not.
actually.
Say that again, sorry.
Biology.
Oh, smart guy over here.
Yeah, I don't know about all that.
So I guess look into your life beyond baseball real quick. So what was the idea? Let's say baseball never existed. Was there a plan with the biology degree, or is just what you were interested in?
I want to just pick something broad enough to where I could narrow it down once I was done playing baseball. So like a degree that wouldn't close any doors for me, but it wasn't so narrow that if I had it, then I was like stuck in that one thing. So it's broad enough to where if whenever the day comes that I'm done playing, I can sort of research options and things that would interest me, and I can go from there.
Yeah, and tickle the science part of the brain for a little
Yeah,
bit.
something like that.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, well, I guess we'll get back on topic for a moment. So let's hop into the thick of things. The UCL tear, how that kind of went about. Maybe before we even get into that, let's take a deeper look at the minor league progression. So that first year was almost a non-year because you got drafted during COVID. So
Mm-hmm.
then you show up to spring training in 2021, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, well, so I actually, my elbow had always given me problems, like dating back to high school. And so in 2021, when I showed up, I was dealing with, like, I just had a partial tear in my elbow since I was 15.
Hmm.
And so in 2021, when I showed up to spring training, it was just barking at me a little bit. And I ended up just like shutting down for 2 weeks, and then it was okay. And I built up and pitched that full, I wouldn't call it full, but I probably threw like 60 innings in 2021. And that off season, it just never really felt right again. So it was like that 2021 year was like the last mileage I got out of my elbow. And so then when 2022 came around, I had a terrible spring training. And then I had a terrible, like, 4 starts or 5 starts or whatever it was in Double A to start that 2022 year. And then it ended up being like, okay, this elbow is, there's only one way to fix this. So I ended up getting Tommy John, and that rehab process, I guess, is a whole separate conversation in its own right, but it definitely fixed the problem. Yeah.
For
So
sure.
like, I mean, since that surgery, my elbow's just, I guess I had never really known what it was like to pitch with the elbow that wasn't partially torn at a competitive level. So doing that now is like, oh, like this is a way different feeling than how I've ever known pitching to be.
Yeah, you're playing a different game finally. That's got to be nice.
Yeah.
So, how'd you manage elbow pain for what, 8, 9 years?
Yeah. I guess it was always something that if it was affecting the outcome, then I knew like I had to get something done. But if I was succeeding and pitching well and my velocity was good, my command was good, all that was fine, then I mean, if my elbow hurt, like it never hurt bad enough to affect my ability until it did. So I
Right.
guess that's the sort of the breaking point. The professional season, I could hide behind it in a college or high school season, but the length of the professional season sort of exposed that it's just not a very sustainable way to pitch.
Right. Pitching once a week for a few months a year versus pitching
Every
one
five
and a
days for
half
8 days.
times a week for 7 months.
Yeah, it's a much different ask of your body, especially if it's not all the way healthy. Yeah, it definitely wasn't.
For a long time, was it just being smart about the way you ramped up, or is that just kind of what you thought baseball was like? Just like, ah, my
I
elbow's sore, I'll be fine.
Yeah, like that was just normal for me. Like it got to a point where even when I got surgery a week before surgery, I was like, well, maybe we can just like try to find a way that I can throw harder. So we were like doing pull downs before I was doing surgery, and it just like my arm just wouldn't it wouldn't do it. Yeah, but the pain threshold was just so normal to me that it had no impact on me from that regard. But from a performance aspect, like it was clearly impacting things. And now that I throw, it's like, oh, that's a way different feeling throwing a baseball than how it felt before.
So, spending some time now on the surgery, you said you had a partial tear for however many years that was. When you
Yeah.
ultimately got operated on, was it completely torn or were you still hanging on by a thread?
Yeah. So I think I had two partial tears when they went in, and then a couple bone spurs and a stress reaction on my elbow bone. So yeah, it was beat up.
Yeah, I don't think that would constitute as healthy or encourage
No. Yeah.
the
He
rehab
like,
route.
the Dr. Meister the next day was like, yeah, well, how are you?
Sorry, Dr. Meister, I'm built different.
Maybe not that. It's probably smarter to get it done earlier. I would have saved myself some time. So
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
I guess that
hey,
would be my advice. Like, if you feel any type of pain, no matter how, like, unless you're in the big leagues working towards a World Series or something, probably get the thing taken care of.
I mean, if you would have continued to try to muscle through it or be a man, whatever phrasing you would have put on it, you probably just would have hurt your own career because people either would have thought
You're not good anymore. Yeah.
you're not good enough or you're unreliable. I don't know, just a bunch of bad things.
Yeah. No,
Nothing
I
reasonable.
definitely hurt myself trying to push through it that 2022 season. Like, I mean, if you look at any of my statistics, I've always pitched fairly well, and then there's my 2022 year, and it's like, oh, what happened that year? So it like puts a blemish on just who you are as a pitcher and how good you are.
Yeah, I think that's good advice because it is your career. You only get one of them, at
Yeah.
least most of the time. Yeah, there's a couple people that have been able to retire and come back, but that's so uncommon.
Mm.
And especially when you're in the minors or when you're at a lower level and you have to prove yourself, you might as well do it when you are as close to 100% as physically and mentally possible.
Oh, definitely. Well, and just it's way more draining pitching knowing that like you're hurt as opposed to pitching when you're like, oh, I'm like, I can go out there inhibition free.
Was there ever a point where you thought like, oh, this next pitch might be it?
No, because I was just so used to how it felt. It was more like, oh my god, I like just threw a 84-mile-an-hour fastball to the backstop. Like that's awful. Yeah, it's like I'm terrible. Yeah,
You you hadn't done that since your sophomore year of high school or something.
literally. I was like, I threw harder when I was 15.
So,
Um,
did you have a doctor's appointment when you were 15? Like how do you find out that you have the partial tear way back
yeah, I
then?
did. I did.
And way back in high school, where they were just
Yeah,
like, "Hey, just
it would have been my junior year of high school, and then I just like, I guess I was so like young and underdeveloped that I just took like a couple months off of throwing, and then I got stronger, and then it sort of just protected it enough for the next couple years.
it is amazing what strength can do."
For sure. I mean, I was like 165 pounds, and then I'd sort of just like matured into my body, so that I guess that shielded it a little bit, but
Definitely. Yeah,
not enough to where I could do it forever.
and I know you said the rehab was a whole different animal. I didn't want to try to sprinkle it in there. So maybe open up the door on that rehab now. So you get the surgery in 2022 after a few crappy performances. You had your surgery with Dr. Meister. What happened after the surgery? You go back to Massachusetts? Did you go back to Florida?
Yeah, so I actually was in Florida until Hurricane Ian it hit our spring training complex. And so then I did the rest of my rehab up in Massachusetts because we had nowhere we didn't have a place that we could do it. And then I didn't start throwing until I went back and we were in Orlando for spring training. So that was when I started playing catch and stuff. So I guess that part of it was interesting. I mean, the first couple of months of rehab just are boring. You're in your sling, you can't really do much. Then you like when you can get in the weight room and you can use your arm and that sort of thing, like then it feels more like you're working towards something. And then finally when you start playing catch, then it actually feels like, okay, I'm getting close to playing again. But even then, I guess at every stop, like every checkpoint was just a new mental hurdle. Like you would sort of unlock new things that you had forgotten about. Like I think my first my first game back, there was a ground ball at first base, and I was just standing on the mound. I was like, oh wait, I was supposed to cover there, and the guy was safe. Like, oh man, that's part of baseball. Like, yeah. And it's just like, I guess things like that you just forget.
Yeah, you forget about the game. You've been just throwing for so long.
Competing and everything. Like you're just throwing and trying to get your body healthy. That I would say last off season, I couldn't really work on things. I was just trying to remember how to throw and get my pitches to move how I wanted them to move, instead of just focusing on being healthy. Like, I had to remember how to pitch and compete and stuff. And I would say, like, it's such a better feeling coming into an off season like this year, where I competed for a whole year. So now I sort of know, oh, I can just work on competing and getting my pitches moving where I want and commanding them, as opposed to like remembering how to pitch.
Yeah, for sure. I want to go back to those different kind of milestones you spoke on. So maybe those first few months, did you have anybody with you rehabbing at the same time at the complex? I know that can be a lonely place, especially as you said, when you're stuck in a sling, you're really only getting pushed on by a trainer a
Yeah,
few
we did.
times a week.
We had a couple of guys. I would say probably three other Tommy Johns within a couple months of me. We all were in it together. And then there's always, I mean, there's just so many, it's such a long season and so strenuous that the rehab room gets guys, like, it's like a revolving door sometimes. So there's always guys around in that aspect. But I would say once the hurricane hit and I was home, I did spend a lot of time just by myself rehabbing, it was just a different experience for me, but one that, like, I was very grateful for. I got to really hang out with my friends from home, just sort of do things outside of baseball that I normally wouldn't have had the chance to do. So really, it's hard for me to look on. I don't want to do it again, but it's to look on the rehab process as something that was like, oh, that was awful, because it really wasn't awful, and I made the most of it for sure. But at the same time, I'm all set. I don't want to do that anymore.
It's that's probably good. I don't wish that upon you or anyone for that matter.
Yeah, it's way more fun to play.
Yeah. When you were home, that's probably a good spot to bring this up. When you were getting to see your friends, do something different, kind of live that normal post grad life, because then I'm assuming at that time all your friends have now graduated
Yeah, they
college.
graduated, moved into Boston, all that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're like in the city, like these like multi roommate apartment situations, I'm sure, like
No,
going
for
out at
sure.
night.
Yeah.
Was there a point where you were like, I don't know if this baseball thing's for me. This is pretty fun.
Never that.
Okay.
I've always loved, like, since I was a kid, I just love baseball. Like, it's so much fun. And I guess that, like, that I would always come back to that, like, no matter what part of the process that I was going through. Like, it was never really a question in my mind of if I was going to come back and play. It was more so the question was like, I just wouldn't know what that looked like.
Right. A matter of when more
Yeah,
than
pretty
if.
much. Oh, for sure. And then I didn't know what it was going to look like when I did come back. Like, I just hadn't done it in a long time. So
Yeah. So how did it feel then that first time you were able to go back to the complex? You're done rehabbing by yourself, and I guess eyes were put on you for the first time. You were cleared to throw, right? Because you said you weren't
I
able to
started
throw
playing,
until you,
like, I did like my first like 60 feet catch over the winter. But I think my throwing program really started once I got down to spring training. And then I was throwing bullpens. I think my first bullpen was May, I want to say, of 2023. So yeah, it was just like, I didn't know how to I didn't know how to throw anymore. It's
and
like you forget everything.
how
It
many
becomes very
months had
robotic.
that been since your actual surgery? When was the surgery date?
My
Even if it's not the
surgery
specific
was,
day.
I think my surgery was in June, so I think my first bullpen was 11 months after.
Okay.
I'm not, maybe it was April and it was 10 months after, but it was sometime in that range.
Okay, so I guess because of when you got your surgery, you might have had a longer timeline than some people might have. Just you, I
If
guess you
they had
got
got it
the
in like September, I think it's a little faster than if you
right.
yeah. So I only ended up coming back and pitching like July through the rest of the season then.
So
Um
when in the process did you actually feel like a pitcher again or a baseball player? Was it that first time you stepped on the field and you forgot to cover first base?
no. I would say honestly, it didn't even feel like that. It didn't feel like that at any point in 2023 because I didn't have the pitches that I had before, like the way they moved and everything. Like I was still figuring things out. I was just like kind of competing, like which was good for me because I was competing without the stuff that I am used to having. And I would say even a little bit at the beginning of this year, even though the results were good, I was still like remembering how, like my strengths as a pitcher, which of my pitches work best, how to play them off of each other. I would say probably a month into the season this year, I was like, okay, I'm firmly back in where I need to be. But I mean, it is a long process, especially. I mean, you can't replicate what it means to pitch in a game and learn throughout the course of a season. So that's the only way that really you can start to feel normal again. Is you just got to get back out there and do it.
Yeah, I think that's really good perspective. It's not something that I could ever attest to because I didn't go through it. I didn't play at the level that you played at, but it sounds like mentally it took you almost two full
Two
years to
years,
get
yeah.
back.
And I mean, if I had been able to pitch in more games, maybe it wouldn't have been as long. But yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate for a lot of guys to feel like totally completely normal again. Is that 2 year time frame? And really, all that is just like that's how long it takes to get the reps back in that you missed. And so I would say that that feeling is pretty well echoed from everyone I know that's had it. And it's so frustrating too because when you're going through it, everyone tells you that, and you're like, well, I'm gonna be the different one. Like I'll feel like myself day one, and it's just, I mean, it's just not realistic. You don't. It takes a while.
Were there any blessings in disguise, I guess, during the rehab process? I guess a couple where you got to go home for the first time,
Yeah, and
see
I mean,
family.
it's just exploring all those parts of yourself outside of baseball. So I would say like for me personally, a lot of my confidence was tied into my performance and who I was as a baseball player. A lot of that was like part of my identity. And so that time off just sort of helps you realize like, oh no, my identity is not baseball player, even though that's what you do. And your confidence doesn't come from whether you perform or don't perform. It's more of an inherent sort of thing. So that was, I would say, the biggest blessing for me over that whole entire time period.
It is so amazing what surgery does to people or long-term injury
Yeah, or
because
really anything that makes you step away from your normal routine, like anything that makes you take a step back, I think gives you that perspective.
yeah, I swear I have said the exact same thing and possibly the exact same words you just said it from my shoulder surgery. The problem is it took me like 5 years post surgery to figure out everything that you just said. It was a
Yeah,
way
I had a much
slower,
more
longer
isolated window
process
to
for
sort
me.
of, yeah, I had a much more isolated window to figure things out, I guess. And I mean, I wouldn't say I have it figured out by any means, but it's just it's so much less. I guess the where I really notice it is playing now. It's just so much easier to enjoy. I don't ride the like. There's not as much at stake. It feels like every time I pitch, like I can just go pitch, as opposed to before. It was like I had to do well, otherwise, what was I?
Yeah, I think that's tough because it's also self-created almost
Oh, for
every
sure.
single time.
Yeah,
I hate throwing corny phrases out there, but as long as you're okay with yourself at the end of the day, or you can look in the mirror and be okay with who you are and be proud of what you do, like it's all going to be all right.
yeah, exactly. And it like you make things out to be so much bigger of a deal than they really are. And in the end, it's like, oh no, you can just be happy. It's all right.
I guess maybe let's call it one of those super happy times. At least I hope it was a happy time. The first time you actually did pick up the ball in rehab and start to throw. Do you remember that throw? Was it like something where you made that first throw of rehab and you were like, "Oh yeah, I got this. I'm back."
No, and it was hideous. Yeah, I mean, like it. If you look, I don't know if anyone's ever made a good first throwback. Like it just looks disgusting. I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I can let it loose. Like that took me until this year pitching. I would say this past year, where I was throwing like a midweek bullpen between starts, and I like cut one loose. And I was like, oh, that's that. Like, oh, I really feel good now, as opposed to it just took me longer, I guess, to feel the way I was before.
Was there a time in the rehab process where you were kind of able to, I guess, audit your processes? Were you able to make any changes to your routine? Did you even want to make changes? Like, were you able to use that time frame to focus on something in your game that you hadn't focused on before? Or for you, was it truly just get back on the field healthy? That's all I care about.
From my perspective, it's very I sort of fell into the hole of like trying to get my mechanics to look a certain way, and then the learning point from this past year was that's just not how my brain works. So that whole rehab process was like trying to throw in this like fluid motion, and then by trying to do that, it just wasn't very fluid, as opposed to just like I with external cues, like I go throw that as hard as you can, and then my body just sort of organizes the way it's meant to. When I like gave up on trying to make my throw look a certain way and just pitch, then my velocity gets a little better, my command gets better, like everything just sort of aligns for me. So really just learning that about myself. I don't ever want to hear a mechanical cue again. Like I just want someone to tell me to compete, and then things will probably work out.
So once you stopped playing paint by number and you started
Yeah.
just going out there and dancing, it was a good time.
Yeah, just be athletic and compete. And if I'm doing those things, I'm probably in a good spot with my delivery. And if I'm trying to make my delivery do a certain thing, then it's not good.
Now, that can be difficult in the return to throw program because I know there are some old adages of like, oh, well, if you throw this way, you're going to be more at risk to get hurt again, or like, we don't like the way this looks. So, what did some of those conversations look like, I guess, with your rehab specialists or your different coaches? Were you able to have like a level-headed conversation there, or was that super difficult?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say my rehab process was as flawless as it could be. Like I didn't have a setback. I never really felt uncomfortable throwing or anything like that. It was more just like remembering how I did things before. Like you're different when you come back from it, so not trying to replicate what you did before, but just trying to like be what you are. I don't know how I would give someone advice, because there's some guys that just do really well with like patterning movements how they want them to look, and I'm just not one of those guys. So we just worked on getting my pitches to move, throwing them for strikes, and then go out and compete. And then it just sort of was an evolution of waiting for my body to start moving how we wanted it to move.
You've mentioned now a few times trying to regain that movement or regain the pitch shapes. So, did you have changes in your pitch shapes from pre-injury to post-injury? Were you able to recover your arsenal, or has it changed?
It's I mean I threw harder before surgery, I think, by like one mile an hour by the end of the year. So it's still the top end of my velocity. I just don't throw as hard as I did at one point. And then the shapes of my pitches now I think are all pretty much the same. But for a while it just you just don't remember how like your hand comes through on the ball on different pitches and all sorts of things like that. It just takes game reps. Like you can't replicate pitching in a game. So you can throw a million bullpens, but when you get into a game, it's just different. So learning how to get pitches to move how you want them to when you're in a game, and locate them and play them off of each other. That's why this year was so important for me to like I got so many more reps, and I think I got so much better just from actually being able to do things.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess now let's focus on this year a little bit. You threw friggin' 5 or 6 innings once a week for an entire season. And I guess sometimes twice a week, the way the rotation worked out, especially when you were in Triple A.
mhm.
And I know you got to a point where they even told you, hey, you've thrown enough innings. I'm sure that felt good to hear.
Yeah, I had to start skipped at the end of the year and pushed to the next week, the last week of the season, just because I think I blew past what I guess were the expectations of what I was capable of, which is just honestly fun. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was just getting reps in. Like I got to face so many more hitters. I got to throw so many different pitches in different locations and learn what I'm good at, what I need to work on. And that's feedback that you can only get over the course of 140 some innings of pitching. You don't get that in a small burst. by any means. And just facing teams multiple times, and like facing hitters multiple times and learning, okay, like this is how people adjust to me. This is their approach to me. Like there was no scouting report on me before I pitched this year because there was no data. Like I hadn't pitched. So like just establishing those firm scouting reports and projections and stuff like that. And then seeing how guys adjust to you. And then like, that's not something I'd ever had to do before. So all those things are just such valuable information for me and honestly just fun.
So what I was about to do earlier before I rudely cut you off, I was going to put you on the spot. You said you learn what you're good at and what you're bad at. I'd
Mm-hmm.
love to hear from you. What do you think you're good at and what do you think you're bad at? Or
Yeah.
what do you think you need to improve upon is probably the better way to phrase it.
Yeah. So for me, I about probably a month into the year, maybe less, I realized that I have if the catcher set up a little bit glove side, my command is so much better of all my pitches. But then if he would set up arm side, I would just miss off, especially with my fastball. So that was that's a big point of emphasis for me this offseason. I think if I can move my fastball to glove side, arm side whenever I feel like and like be confident in commanding that, I think that opens up a lot of possibilities for me. But I always like maybe it's the way that I throw, maybe it's the movement of the pitch. I really don't know. But my changeup has always been my best pitch. And I sort of ran, like there were times where I would run away from that because I do throw multiple other ones. And so just sort of like throwing my main pitches, like playing my changeup off my fastball and then playing creating the triangle, I guess. So with a pitch that moves glove side and just really emphasizing like, those are my three pitches that I'm going to throw the most often. And then I'm going to mix in the other two when it's necessary. And then for a long time, because my changeup was good, I had way better splits against righties than I did lefties. And so that was sort of not something I figured out. I wouldn't say totally figured out, but not something that I was confident in until the end of the year. It took me like probably until I got called up to Durham to make an adjustment to lefties. And really the adjustment was just throwing my changeup more to lefties. So really it's play to your strengths and like buy all in on your strengths was the learning point for me. And then being comfortable in that. Like I think one of our coordinators said, if he watches us pitch, he should know what type of pitcher we are. And there were times early in the year where he was like, I don't know what kind of pitcher you are. And then if I throw my pitches, obviously that are the best, he can watch and anyone can watch and be like, okay, yeah, this guy just has a really good changeup and he plays that off his fastball and off his breaking pitches.
Those are some good takeaways for sure. I think you opening up an arm side fastball just broadens your arsenal fully because
Yeah.
you are able to throw the cutter super effectively in addition to the changeup, the breaking pitches. I mean, your strikeout rate was insane. Your whiff rate was great. So there's no question when it doesn't matter if you're in the zone or around the zone, you're getting swings, you're getting chases.
Mm-hmm.
So just being able to throw arm side as well opens up a whole new tunnel that you can work off of.
Yeah, and that I would say like it just eliminates someone from being able to look only in one quadrant. So if I can play if I can just move my fastball up, down, in, out, I'm good. Like I don't really try to focus on moving my breaking pitches into different quadrants, I would say. But if I can do that with my fastball, then I think it'll open up a lot more avenues for me to be successful.
And I did want to clarify one thing. You did say you've had better splits against righties because of your changeup. If we didn't say it earlier, Ian's left-handed. That's probably important to throw out here.
That's probably fun. I don't know if we did clarify that. That's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I am lefty.
So you said your changeup has just always been your best pitch. Is there another pitch that you've really worked on developing that helped you have success this year, or like a secondary offering that you felt like you could go to? Maybe you had more success with it than you ever expected to.
I started throwing the cutter when I was in college, and it's just like a bridge pitch for me. Like it doesn't really get whiffs. It doesn't get hit hard unless I throw it right down the middle. But it just sort of like it gives a different look than the predominant fastball changeup combination. But I think for this offseason, if I can add some velocity, especially to bigger slider to lefties, I think that'll just give me a more of a dynamic arsenal against them.
And bigger for you means more sweep, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Assuming.
Yeah, not as much depth, but sweep.
I guess let's talk through your arsenal a little bit. So you throw a really good vert fastball, not much horizontal at all. Then the cutter is what's the usual movement plot on the cutter?
Well, so I throw two different ones. I'll throw a true cutter that's just not a ton of horizontal and probably like 12-ish inches of induced vertical break. And then I'll throw one that's more of a traditional gyro slider that's a little bit slower than the true cutter. I'll throw both of them to righties, and then I'll throw predominantly the gyro slider to lefties as the cutter. And then sweeper, and then a big slow 12 ball that I just like throwing for a strike stealer pitch.
The poop loop. Everybody loves a good poop loop.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's slow.
Yeah, how have you like this year seen high curveballs get reintroduced to the game as an effective pitch?
I mean, honestly, I like it grades out so terrible on our pitch grading system, but no one ever swings at it.
Never.
It's like an auto. Like if I throw it in the strike zone, it literally doesn't get swung at.
Yeah, that's got to be a weird concept for you when there is some sort of deviance between what grades well versus what gets out.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I mean, the takeaway is just like you probably shouldn't be throwing that pitch 40% of the time because people
yeah,
will start swinging at it. But if you use it sparingly enough, then it's just why would they go up there looking for it?
how difficult is that for you when you know a piece of technology can be incredibly helpful for your ultimate projections versus you know you're an athlete at heart and the mission is to go out there and get outs and compete and you're trying to win a baseball game and a spreadsheet or a piece of technology might be able to help you improve and it might say you didn't perform that great but you went out and you threw 6 innings, had 6 punchies, 1 walk, and 1 hit. Is that difficult to wrestle with?
Not really, no. I
Oh,
mean, at the
cool.
end of at the end of the day, like if you perform, then someone's gonna give you a chance. Obviously, like within confines. Like I think that's stuff that you can work on in a bullpen, but in a game, like I don't think I've ever looked at what my pitches were moving at. Like I'm just I'm just trying to get people out.
Well, good for you for having that perspective because I'm sure that domes a whole lot of people up.
Yeah, and if it, and it like it's something like you can work on the side, but if it's not something I'm getting right away, like I'm just especially in the middle of the year, like I'm just gonna throw the pitch that works. I don't really I don't need to make it like nasty in the game. Like if I'm throwing a pitch that doesn't grade out well and it's working, like I'm just gonna throw it.
Yeah, so what? Who cares about the grade if it's not getting touched?
Yeah. But then like obviously in the bullpen, we'll try to make adjustments to it and see where we can get it to go and get comfortable with. But when you're actually out there, like you just gotta compete.
I think that's a massive takeaway, honestly, for any younger pitcher, college guy, something like that, or heck, probably even other professionals that are stuck in a rut chasing perfection in something.
Yeah.
You just have a good idea of what's important when. It doesn't mean that stuff isn't important. It's
No,
just a
I
matter
mean
of when it's
stuff is
important.
probably crucially important.
Yeah.
Um I think that yeah, like I mean I would trade stuff with probably a lot like most people. Um, but I think like the part of my, and I guess that comes from like I never really threw hard, so I've always just been able to pitch. So I guess my big sort of goal for this offseason is just get those stuff grades bumped up a little bit, but not by changing how I throw or what I do well. Just sort of like putting on a little size in the weight room, a little bit more aggressiveness with my throwing program, but nothing like crazy. And just hope that a couple more years removed from the surgery, the velocity comes back.
Yeah, there could be, just as you said in that last piece, whether it's conscious thought or subconscious thought, just more confidence in what you can do and what your body can handle that
Yeah.
may just unlock another tick or two.
Yeah. Well, and I also think like the when you get the surgery, your elbow joint is so much tighter. So I think it just takes a little bit for like some people longer than others for your external rotation, like just to be able to lay back a little bit more.
Yeah, and just getting comfortable handling that load time and time again and
Yeah,
just
exactly.
letting it eat, truly, just
Yeah. Well, and
having the
that's
confidence.
really the part. Like, I'm not trying to remember how to throw. Like, I'm just building on my natural delivery this off season, which I think just comfortability in that, as opposed to that part of your mind that's thinking like, okay, I got to be moving in this direction, or on in this timing, or feel this sort of pressure wherever, like whatever internal mechanical cue that might be lingering from remembering how you throw. Like, those are
Hmm.
gone now, so I can just sort of fall into throwing how I throw.
For sure. Well, if you're cool with it, now I kind of want to go into the transition from Montgomery into Durham. Maybe what
Cool.
changed, how you felt about your season, just full runway. Talk as long as you want about how your season was progressing, what you were dealing with in Montgomery, and then ultimately that time when you did get the call to go up to 3A.
Yeah, I mean, I was results wise just phenomenal in Montgomery. Like, I think maybe I had one blemish right before the All-Star break, and coincidentally, I got called up after my worst start of the whole year, which is funny how that works. But I think that time period taught me, when you're doing really well, obviously you're like, okay, I would love to move. But that time period sort of taught me, like, there's so many things that are happening outside of your control that you can't give any mind to. And our AAA manager, Morgan Ensberg, always says, just do the good work. So just go out there, get better the day that you have in front of you to get better. And that's all that your focus ever needs to be on. And if you're riding any wave of result, or any wave of like thinking about how you're valued or where you need to be or something like that, then your mind it's outside of where it needs to be. And so that was honestly like a giant growth moment for me. Just like, it's just more professional, I'd say. Like, you understand things a little bit better from that aspect. Like, it's my only job is just to get better today. Like, doesn't matter how the game goes, doesn't matter. You're just putting in the work to be the best that you can be, and that's the only focus that there needs to be. And enjoy it while you're doing it. So I was pumped after the All-Star break, just for a change of scenery, and to sort of see how I fared against Triple A guys. So my first start after the All-Star break, I think I had like 12 days off, so I hadn't pitched in a while, and so I was rusty. My first outing in Durham, and it was like I probably scattered like 9 hits over 5 innings, gave up a couple runs, but just sort of gritted through it. And after that, I sort of just realized like, oh, it's not terrifically different. Like, I just have to execute pitches the way that I was before. And so I just fell back into my routine, got back on track. I started just like, fill up the zone, throw your change up a ton, you're good to go. And that's sort of how things went. And I just rode that momentum through the rest of the season.
What was the biggest difference from level to level, besides ballparks, crowds, or anything like that? The actual gameplay.
I would say that, like, in AAA, you just sort of run into guys who have been around longer and have seen more pitching. They won't really do things out of their approach. Whereas like in AA, like, I could throw a pitch and someone would just like absolutely hammer it, and you'd be like, well, how were they ready for that pitch? Like, it didn't make any sense. And I mean, that still happens obviously at any level, but I would say that, like, there's more of a thinking aspect to pitching in AAA, especially against those guys who have been up and down and like they're and have seen so much more pitching, that they're doing what they do well, and then I'm trying to do what I do well. So it's they they don't want to chase my changeup; they'll just not swing at anything at the bottom of the zone. And so I would throw I would get to 2 strikes, and I would throw a changeup just below the strike zone, and it wouldn't even budge. I'd be like, well,
Hmm.
how did they take that? And then would do it again, and same pitch, like perfectly located, wouldn't even budge. And then it's like, oh well, they've eliminated everything down. Like, they're only going to swing at pitches up. So I can either expand a fastball up, or I can paint a fastball down and strike out looking. And I end up throwing a fastball right at the knees, punch out looking. So it was like, that was not a way that I was thinking in Double A. Like, in Double A, like, I was just out stuffing guys more so than in Triple A. And in Triple A, it was more of like a complete pitching performance.
So, would you leave games in AAA more mentally exhausted than AA just because of how tapped in you needed to be on your approach or what pitches you needed to execute?
Um, Honestly, I don't. I'm not someone that gets mentally exhausted. Like I truly just enjoy it. It's just a ton of fun for me. There's not much stress involved. It's just something that like I really just was having fun.
Yeah. I mean, that's super impressive that you could pair that analysis that you gave in the previous answer. I mean, I wouldn't have asked that question that I just asked otherwise about being mentally exhausted because I get it. Like, yeah, you're just going out there and throwing, but your analysis of reading hitters or how the game has changed just got me thinking. So I
Yeah,
had
that
to.
was definitely the newest part. And I would say like I was probably just more attentive on days I wasn't pitching in
Mm.
as I was in Montgomery. As in Montgomery, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna beat these guys. Like it doesn't matter. And I would say that probably took away from my growth as a pitcher. Whereas in Durham, I was more so forced to watch guys all week long if I was pitching later in the week and watch other guys who were pitching before me and seeing how they attack guys and just sort of adjusting off that. And it's just more fun to be engaged in the game anyway.
Do you feel the game was called any different or the zone was different at
Yeah,
AAA?
that's definitely the ABS is. I think I don't know if that's itself is smaller, but I think that it's just called a little tighter because
Hmm.
you have the ability to challenge, and I think they would rather call strike a ball than a ball a strike. So the zone inherently was a little smaller, but not like. I mean, you got to throw strikes anyway. Like if you throw a strike is a strike. It's like the borderline calls that you might not get as much.
For sure. And how'd you like the challenge system?
I don't think I ever won one.
Oh, that stinks.
Yeah, I did. My last start of the year, I just wanted to use one, and I lost. And then I had a couple like go against me. So like I would. One of them was a strikeout that he challenged, and it like revoked the strikeout. So like that was also just an adjustment. Like I mean, mentally, if you punch someone out, you're like moving on to the next guy, but you would have to wait and like still be locked into the at bat.
That's really funky.
Yeah. Yeah, if the call gets overturned, which yeah, I've had probably like 3 or 4 overturned on me.
So, I mean, you pitched extremely well when you went up to Triple A. So there was no real change in result. It's like you were able to just pick up right where you left off, pretty much,
Yeah,
huh?
I think I think after that first start, it was just that confidence of like, oh, I do what I do. Like there's a little bit more thought that goes into it and that adjustment that I made, but other than that, it was like, oh, I just play to my strengths and my strengths hopefully if I execute are going to be better than like the odds are in my favor, especially if I get ahead. So
For sure. So you hinted at it. I'm now going to fast forward again to kind of where we are now. You said the main goal of this offseason is just improve stuff a little bit, correct?
yeah, so I mean it's the command of the fastball to the different quadrants of the zone, and then probably a little bit of like at the bigger slider, so the sweeper, adding some velocity to that. Honestly, just add 2 miles an hour to every pitch, and I'm pretty happy. Which is,
Hmm.
I mean, that's not a small tick up. And if I don't achieve it, then like, oh well, like I am what I am. I'm not gonna certainly do anything crazy to get that. But yeah, just like add a little bit of size to get me through the season. Hopefully, I end up throwing 40 more innings than I did this year, and then hopefully the velocity ticks up with that, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm not trying to change too much, with the success that I had last year. I just sort of continuation of what we were doing.
Right. It's pretty hard to argue with the 2.35 ERA and the 3.09 FIP.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you keep track of your own stats, but also the 162 Ks and 145 and a third is pretty decent, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I remember I wanted to get to 150 innings. I knew I didn't get there, but
It's because they skipped you on a start.
that's what it was. I would have had it.
You were guaranteed 5 innings.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know how many outings you had on the year that you didn't go 5.
I can tell you one.
The last outing before you got called up, huh?
My last Montgomery outing. That was a dud.
Well, hopefully you don't have to step foot back in Montgomery and that can just be your last one.
What a legacy to leave behind. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, I want to switch things up just a little bit before we finish up the call. So I always like doing this with the guys that have played at damn near every level.
Hmm.
So regardless of level, I don't care if it was Little League. What is your single favorite ballpark you have ever played in?
Ooh, ballpark. I just have a soft spot for Charleston. Like just everything about that city. I love the beach. They sell out every game pretty much. So I adored my time in Charleston.
Yeah, and I'm 2 hours away and I haven't been to a game there yet. So maybe I'll make that a point this coming year. I'll go check it out
Yeah,
just
have
for
yourself
you.
a nice beach weekend. Yeah, catch a game. It's a good place to be.
For sure. Okay, and then without getting too vulgar, because I'm sure they get crazy, what was your first like big welcome to the minors moment? Not something on the field, but I don't know, like broken down bus, some busted travel situation, catering didn't show up.
Well, this year my car got broken into
Great.
and my identity got stolen. While we were on a road trip. So that was cool.
Oh, that's
We were on a
so brutal.
we were on a 2 week road trip. We were about to leave later that day, and we had a team meeting. They're like, "Listen, guys, we've had some break-ins in the cars in the lot back in Montgomery." And I came back, and sure enough, they got me.
That's brutal. Sorry for laughing.
Yeah, no, I mean it's funny now. Whatever. Yeah, and then I kept getting these notifications like a credit card has been opened in your name. Like, what?
Is that how you found out your
Yeah,
identity got stolen?
yeah. So I had to freeze my credit and everything.
Well, whoever stole it, I wonder if they know that they were a minor league pitcher on a career year.
Yeah, I hopefully
Yeah.
give them something to smile about besides their
So,
newfound credit card.
what has been your favorite road city?
Road City. Hmm.
You already said Charleston has been your favorite spot. So there's no sense me giving you a layup answer that you can just say Charleston.
Yeah, I got you. I'm trying to think. Columbus, Ohio was very cool. I had a really good time there this year. And then where else was very cool?
Could be a college one too.
Oh, College Whimsy, Florida State was cool. I enjoyed that.
Playing at Tallahassee.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, that was probably one of my favorite weekends in college when we went there.
And how'd that series go for you guys?
No, I mean we weren't very good when I was there.
Ah.
They got good. They were much better once I left. I don't know what that says about me, but
You set the foundation for a lasting legacy.
is that maybe that's a positive way to spin it.
That's what we're going to stick with. And feel free to put that on your Virginia Tech alumni resume.
Got it.
Well, okay. That pretty much sums up my line of questioning. Anything else you feel like we missed or you want to share?
No, honestly, it's just a pleasure being on here and a pleasure working with you, obviously, as another tool and the toolbox of putting together a good year, and hopefully we continue it again next year.
Yeah, man. Well, I really appreciate it. And to the listeners, appreciate y'all laying back with us.